But look, thank you very much for being here this morning. I appreciate when a budget's delivered, there's a range of questions, so let's get straight to it.
Minister, what did you make of Sharon Zöllner's comments casting doubt on that surplus?
Well, as she acknowledges, it's a very difficult time for forecasters because there is uncertainty in the world, and I think that Treasury have been very open about that too. It's not my job to do the forecasting. That is appropriately independent. Treasury are professionals. They do in the budget look at a range of different scenarios that could unfold, and I think it's of note that even in their downside scenario, they still forecast that a return to surplus could be achieved. But we can't take it for granted. And the world is uncertain. That's partly why the government is being so prudent in the budget about a range of measures, including putting aside that fund for future fuel responses if needed, because we acknowledge the uncertainty. I don't know what decisions Donald Trump will be making over these next few weeks, and they will have an impact on New Zealand. That is the case. So I agree with her.
You mentioned yesterday, you alluded to the fact that a range of options for the bank levy were considered. Sort of the one you landed on was the one you could get agreement on. But in terms of revenue, the preferred option that you have, what sort of revenue would that have raised?
Well, the way that we have approached this work and these issues is to say, how does the taxation of banks in New Zealand compare with other jurisdictions? And that work has shown that there are some areas where we do stand out for being a bit different. One area is this area of prudential regulation, where it's common practice around the world that banks pay for their own prudential regulation. And so we're really just getting in step with the rest of the world on that. There are some other areas where we do appear to look quite different, particularly from Australia. And so I have been looking at those changes and we'll continue to actively consider them.
Can you give us some more detail on what those areas
No, I don't want to do that because I don't want to get ahead of my cabinet. But it is to say that I am still looking at options and opportunities. It is the case also in this budget that we have advanced some changes to the rules around the branch arrangements of banks. We've been consulting on that for a long time and we've worked through that with them. This is an area I do think we need to be careful. We need to be prudent. We, across the cabinet, agree on that. We don't want unforeseen consequences, but it's also an area we've got to make sure the banks are being taxed fairly.
What do you mean by the more forceful bank levy or bank tax that you, it seems fair to say that National New Zealand First were keen for a more forceful revenue raising measure. What sort of revenue would that have raised versus the revenue that this levy raises?
It would have raised more.
Billions more?
Look, I'm not going to get into numbers, but it would have raised more. But as I say, this is a work program that I keep active, that I will keep considering options, and I am pleased that the Cabinet agreed to this prudential levy, which I think is a good measure. No, I'm not going to give you an idea of that because a lot of it depends on the design and the settings and the decisions that a government would make.
What do you mean that you are going to continue looking at it? What does that look like? Does that mean updating the current policy? Does that mean the National Party will go to the election with another bank tax policy? What does it mean?
It means that as a minister in this government, I am still actively considering the taxation of banks and what that looks like. As a National Party finance spokesperson, if this government isn't able to make further decisions on that, then I do expect that we will take policies to the campaign.
I just spoke to the CEO of RNZ upstairs, Nicola, and she wasn't particularly pleased with the fact that they're getting...
I don't think that's surprising.
Well, I mean, what sort of conversations did you have with the banking sector before you did this?
Yeah, well, look, I did actually just have a discussion with Antonia, and I said a couple of things which are very true, which is one, I recognise that the banks play a very important role in our economy. The fact that they are standing by their customers during this fuel crisis, during what's a difficult time, matters to all of us. They are a source of investment. I want them lending more to our small businesses who need it. I want them keeping rates affordable for mortgage holders, for people who've got debt. And so that's significant. But as I discussed with her, we do stand out for not having a prudential levy. Actually, this is something we'll be consulting on over the next little while to make sure the design's right. But I think this is fair. I think it's reasonable, and it is a principled approach.
David Seymour said that this, as it stands now, will be passed on to his view is that that would be passed on to customers. Are you sure going above and beyond where we are now wouldn't be passed on to customers?
Well, that's absolutely one of the considerations that we are having, is how do you do this in a way that's fair and transparent and doesn't impose additional costs on customers. That's one of the things I've had in mind too. When you look around the world, there are absolutely countries who have changed their taxation settings for banks without that being passed directly on to customers. Of course, there are a range of views on all of that, but that is something I have in mind too. But the message is the same as it was yesterday, which is commercial banks in New Zealand are our most profitable companies, and they've been profitable not just in the good times, but in the bad times too. And that distinguishes them from other parts of the business community. And my view is that they are in a position where they can continue to be very profitable while also paying a small prudential levy and without imposing those costs on their customers. They do not have to do that, and they should not.
Minister, New Zealand First and Winston Peters suggested that it was inappropriate for you to talk about superannuation in your speech yesterday. What do you make? How do you respond to that?
Well, of course, it is appropriate for me to share basic facts about what's happening with the government finances. And all I pointed out in my speech is that that cost of superannuation in the books that I published yesterday is rising fast right now, going up 1.8 billion in the next year alone. As a finance minister, it is my job to be a good steward of the government finances and to be open and transparent about what's happening with them. And the rising super bill is part of the context in which we put together budgets. So I think it's appropriate to share that with New Zealanders.
How are you going to make
big
changes?
protest outside last night against the fees-free cancellation. Do you worry that you might have lost the youth vote?
No, because my experience with young people is that the issues that they really care about are, am I going to get a good job when I graduate? They worry a lot about housing, and our government has made real progress on the housing affordability front. We have more first home buyers in the market than has been the case for several years. They care about rents. Well, rents have stabilised under our government. All of those things matter to New Zealand's young people. In fact, I'd say this is a budget almost more about young people than any other recent budget, in the sense that we know that if we keep splashing the cash now, it's young people who will end up paying more tax in future. And I want to be fair, not just to the generation paying tax now, but to the future generation of taxpayers.
Labor has been really critical of your reductions to baseline spending for the public service, but haven't themselves committed to cancelling those 5%. What does that say?
It says that Labor have no plan, no ideas, and actually are the least prepared opposition I think New Zealand has seen in decades. It is extraordinary to me that they do not have a position on anything, and it shows just how badly the country would be put at risk if we were to have a change of government at this election, because they have not done any of their homework. And in fact, what that means is they're just going to default back to what they've always done, which is borrow more, spend more, tax more, and that would be extremely damaging to our economy at a time of global uncertainty. I am shocked that they don't have a position on anything.
Minister, last night at the Music Awards, Dame Linda Top had a bit of a crack at the government. You might have seen the comments. We need support for artists in this country. We need a government that says the arts are more important than the defence budget. Just wondering what your reaction to the comments are.
Well, I agree with her that the arts are very important, and in fact in this budget one of the areas that we've committed funding to is the domestic screen production sector, in which many of our talented on-screen artists rely. Why did we do that? Well, because the last government left a fiscal cliff there. They only provided short-term funding, and we've now put that in to sustain that program. So there is funding in the budget for the arts. It hasn't been discussed yet, but it is there. And look, defence, I appreciate that not everyone looks at the defence budget and says that that's about me, but look around the world, it is more unstable than ever. We need to be able to protect and advance New Zealand's interests in a world where there is unfortunately a lot more conflict, and that for us is largely about showing the partners that we rely on for peace and security that we're doing our bit. It's also about our friends and family in the Pacific, because when disaster strikes in the Pacific, it is often our defence force that need to get there and help them with essential supplies and rebuilding, and we need to be equipped to do that.
Is arts more important than the defence, and vice versa?
Well, I think that they're both important, and they both have a significant role for New Zealand, and that is the case that we continue as a government to invest in the arts and we invest in defence.
But we're talking about the defence budget here. Do you think that defence is more important than the arts?
I think it's very important for New Zealand in an unstable world that we be investing significantly in rebuilding the capability of our defence force. We have servicemen and women who are literally prepared to put their lives on the line for this country. They've been living in shoddy housing They have not been properly supported. They haven't had modern training facilities, and in this budget we're investing in those things because we recognise having a reliable defence force matters to the security of every New Zealander.
You've been very clear about the importance of changes to superannuation. How are you going to do that if you're in a coalition with New Zealand First?
Well, I will go to the campaign trail as the National Party finance spokesperson with my view on what would be appropriate, well-signalled, fair, transparent, gradual changes to New Zealand superannuation. And then we will do what we do in a great healthy democracy. We'll have a debate about that. And all I've been saying is let's not take that discussion off the table and make it banned. Let's have that discussion because young people in particular deserve to know what their superannuation entitlements will look like in the future. And politicians who pretend that nothing will ever change, I don't think are being upfront and honest.
Do you back yourself to win that debate with Winston Peters?
I back myself to have a lot of New Zealanders say, well, actually, this is an area which you need to be talking about. It really strikes me, the people who I get the congratulatory texts from whenever I talk about New Zealand superannuation, they're younger. It's my friends in their 30s, it's people in their 20s saying, actually, this is something where we can see that for us as future superannuitants, politicians need to start grappling with it now, because otherwise what we are saying is that we will just impose a huge amount of tax on you, or these entitlements will totally change radically overnight one day. I think a gradual approach is more responsible.
Can you give a bit more detail to that remark you made in the lock-up yesterday about higher taxes and lower super payments if you don't change anything? Yeah, well look, simply the case that for every dollar of tax that you pay, a significant percentage of that is now supporting superannuation entitlements, but it will grow rapidly over time. So as more of the tax dollar is going into superannuation, there's less available to invest in education and health and infrastructure. And so that means that you're effectively squeezing your investment in other areas. So I want us to have settings where we can continue to afford to invest in education and health as well as superannuation, but do it without just lifting taxes. And the reason that I highlighted that yesterday was that we're in the crunch now where it's starting to grow, but we still have time to do something gradual, responsible and fair, but we'll run out of time to do it if we don't start having the conversation now. And those child poverty numbers yesterday, they're not looking, the forecasts are not looking very good. Is there anything policy-wise, and your answer on the lock-up yesterday was getting the macroeconomic foundations right, but is there anything policy-wise on the government side of things that you can do to turn those numbers around? Well,
one of the most important indicators of whether a child will grow up in poverty or not is whether their parents can get work. And so it is really significant that we are seeing job creation in the budget, because when parents are working, they are better able to financially support their children. It's also the case that as a government, we're being very active about ensuring that we are helping those who are unemployed into work by creating incentives in the welfare system and the budget. There is investment, particularly to provide support to sole parents, to provide them the case management and support to get into jobs. One of the things I always have in mind is the childcare costs that people face when they return to work, and we have ensured that we have improved the settings there, both with the family boost payment, but continuing to invest more in early childhood centres, the childcare subsidy that goes to those on very low incomes. And I think that that's important, so that when parents are trying to return to work, they don't see childcare costs as such a barrier that it prevents them.
Will ECE and family boost, changing the settings around that, be something you might campaign on?
I've just announced a massive budget with literally hundreds of policies, and now you're asking me to announce my campaign policies too. Let's stick to what's in the budget.
We have to wrap up if you want more shots.
Yes.
Yes.
You've talked a lot about restraint. Are there any items you would have liked to have spent on but chose not to?
Absolutely. I mean, I would have loved to have given financial relief to every New Zealander in the form of tax relief. I'm very conscious that we take money from you that I then spend, and it's money that you earned by working hard, and I always think a responsible government should be thinking about how do we make sure that New Zealanders both earn more and are able to keep more of what they earn. But equally I know that they expect the government to have the resources it needs to invest in the things we all depend on, our health service, our education service, that defence capability, modern infrastructure. So I think we've struck the right balance in this budget between making those investments, being fair on the workers of today and being really fair on the workers of tomorrow.
Have you got time for a quick spin on one of these games?
I think we can if we do Radio New Zealand by phone.
By phone, and are they happy with that?
They would prefer you to be in the studio, but Jason would prefer you to be here.
Okay.
Between TVNZ and RNZ, go on.
Well, I'm not, yes, okay, yes, thank you.